Hi, this is Sheila with Conscious Conversation Central, and today is Monday, December 3rd, 2018. I almost said 23rd, y'all. I don't know why. That's kind of weird. Okay. Well, I don't even know how to start this one out. It's going to be a big one. I'm just going to say that right up front. Might as well get it right out there in the open. Not beat around the bush about it. Because I personally, after our last conversation, have been struggling a bit with the idea that perhaps I'm not as convinced of a thing as I once thought. And after struggling quite a bit over the weekend, in conversation with Lisa the next morning, the words cognitive dissonance kind of came up. And I was like, well, oh crap. I guess that would describe, and you actually said something to the tune of like, Christopher Columbus and the, the indigenous didn't actually see the ships.
That's the story, yeah.
That's the story that
but
they
of course,
actually.
Anything around Christopher Columbus, I'm not sure that you start the sentence with that, and I'm not really paying attention.
Well, okay, I get that. I get that, and I'll go you that. But I will tell you that I have witnessed it myself in person with people who just can't see a thing.
Right.
And I'm not talking about an idea either. I'm talking about a physical object. They can't see it.
Right. Well, yeah. I mean, so we can get into that. They can see it, but there's something in their brain that clicks to interrupt that. And yeah, that makes sense. Okay. So, remember what I was just saying about this one page that I found that I was looking something up, and that whereas it could be said that, it'd be a helpful, quote unquote, page to read on cognitive dissonance. Because I just wanted to do a quick thing if people listen to this and they go look at cognitive dissonance. Well, the problem is that most of the, I'll use a linear word, schlock that you find about cognitive dissonance is going to set you up for having more cognitive dissonance. And when you just brought up Columbus, right, and not being able to see the schooners and all that kind of stuff from the shoreline, I thought, and I was going to bring up this one page, and I said, well, page was written, I think, for this very time that we're in. And I'm pretty certain when I put that two together that story, whether it's true or not, is irrelevant, because the story and people bringing it forward is also a handy thing to point to with some, for this time now. So, actually, that's not the point I was getting. The point I want to make is because that cognitive dissonance is part of a fail-safe shield to a large extent, not completely, but to a large extent, on your programming. So you just described, Sheila, that you've been standing right next to someone, and a physical thing, right, that is being discussed, this being that you're standing right next to cannot see it.
That's correct.
And that's when I said, well, they actually can see it through the visual input and the way that you see, but it's clicks in them. And when I said that, that's when I had the conversation. This is a very long way around to describe that yes, that click could be described as cognitive dissonance, but it could be also described as a fail-safe clicking into place in your program.
Okay, so I had in mind this, when it came in to talk about this, it was going to be what is cognitive dissonance and how does one get rid of it? Because that's, let's get to brass tacks here, because the thing is, after
want it gone. Okay.
Yes, that's right. I want it outie. After this conversation this morning, and I've had that experience, and we've talked about this off camera, and we've talked about it on camera a little bit with phasing, right? Phasing in and out of one particular frequency or another. And I was out doing some errands today, and when I walked out of the building, and I only went locally, so it's not like it's a huge parking lot. It was, step out of the building, I should have been able to see my vehicle. And all of a sudden, twice today, it wasn't there. And the first time, I know there was somebody, I was coming out of the bank, and there was somebody parked right in front of the door where I was coming out of, and my car I should have been able to see it right when I walked out the door, and it wasn't there. And I know I must have looked kind of weird, like this old lady who's lost her way or something, because I was like, okay, wait a minute. Now I know my car was out here, and it's a 92 Oldsmobile. Nobody wants that car. So it's not like I thought and it was like that quick, and it was there.
Mm-hmm.
So
that's not cognitive dissonance.
No, I realize that, but in light of
that's something else, but it's not cognitive dissonance.
But cognitive dissonance.
So the car was actually not there and then came there. Yes, but that's not cognitive dissonance. That's
I told Lisa next time I'm going to look at my keys to see if they've changed.
Yeah,
I'm staying in that.
Get in the nicer car. The nicer car.
Quit looking for the 92 olds. Look for the
car that you prefer. That's the one.
So, at any rate, that I don't know. It just seemed kind of funny that both of these things would be happening like right now. Okay, so
makes perfect sense to me.
Okay. All right. So we'll just take the cognitive dissonance then. How does one get rid of that or deal with that? Or
whatever you resist persists. So I would let go of that whole fact right there.
Thank you.
Number one. Number two. Remember, I don't know, back in December, January, we had one of our first conversations around telepathy and, got to do it right, got to do it, So I just want to throw that in here, not about telepathy, but it kind of equates the same thing with cognitive dissonance. So one of the things I found,
the telepathy conversation, we kind of came to, or I thought we did, because I feel like, we got attached to holding it in a certain manner.
Right. Telepathy is
why
go look at a definition of it, and then I'm not doing it right. I can't do it. It's wrong. And when I was trying to say that, how many beings are there in all of multiverses of sources, and there are, one could say, well, there's two different kinds of telepathies, and one is a heart-based, and yeah, okay, but what I was trying to get beyond is there's way beyond the two different kinds, because then that's putting into a definition and this, that, and the other thing. And part of cognitive dissonance, part of when we keep scripting something. So if a word is given to us, or a phrase in this case, because it's two words, a phrase is given to us. One of the reasons that it's given to us, do you understand my meaning when I'm talking about if it's given to us?
Yeah.
Like,
yes, ma'am.
I think so.
Okay. you're going, oh, that was weird, freaky with the car, and you have a thought, or in your conversation, however you perceive it. So the phrase was given to you of cognitive dissonance. Well, one of the reasons that something like that occurs is because that's going to be the closest match that you have in your noggin that they can pull out, or you can pull out, right? Because it's all you can pull out and go cognitive dissonance.
Because it's for your perception filter that it's coming through.
Right. It's like if they said something, yellow and then creamy on the inside, and you could slip and fall on your butt. Banana. Okay, right? That could be typed with lots of other things. So.
Right.
So I just want to make that clear as well. So that doesn't mean that it's wrong or askew what you're getting. I'm just saying that's one of the things oftentimes you'll get, because a certain way that you're holding it, and again, if you are resisting something, you're going to have more of a push me, pull you to it, which is kind of exacerbate your feeling on a particular word or phrase, right? So that may be another reason why that phrase, in this case, cognitive dissonance, is pulled, because there's a lot of ways to look at it. So one thing I just want to read here. So cognitive dissonance in psychology as a definition. And so if people haven't learned it yet, this is a good programming note where you look things up. It's going to make a huge difference on what actually it means. So, but this one is stating that the state of having inconsistent, and I'm going to bracket that word there, inconsistent thoughts, beliefs, or attitudes, especially as relating to behavioral decisions and attitude change. Okay. So does that kind of describe where we are right this moment in now?
Now.
No.
Well,
she
read
said
that again. Wait a minute. Read that again, if you don't mind.
The state of having inconsistent, and we'll go back to that particular word inconsistent in a minute, thoughts, beliefs, or attitudes, especially as relating to behavioral decisions and attitude change. So in this moment of now, on December 3rd, 2018, if you look out any window, no matter what part of the planet that you're on, right, like in Berlin or Paris, just to name a few locations, right? There's a lot of stuff going. So that description you could say is apt. Now, inconsistent with the company line, because you've got your own programming and your own storyline that you made up, that you've thought about things wherever you are. So now you got a lot of storylines, because you can have multiple storylines within yourself depending on who was, the main injector of the original part of that particular programming thread, right? Doesn't your computer have multiple pretty robust programs running on it that can do sophisticated things? Okay, so now you can see that you don't have just one programming. Sorry.
Yeah, no, I'm positive of that. I've been programmed, and I would be willing to bet that if everybody just took a couple of minutes, you could point. We've programmed each other so much so that it's almost everybody you've ever come into contact with that has added to your programming in somewhere.
So I got pinged again that whole idea of the phrase of cognitive dissonance. I hadn't thought about it until a few moments ago, but could very likely have been set into motion, had research done for these very moments of now. So it's a real thing when these different things happen, but it's not as cut and dried, which is somewhat of an oxymoron relating to cognitive dissonance, but nonetheless, it's accurate about cognitive dissonance. So how do you get rid of it? Well, first of all, get out of your head.
Right.
Because It's cognitive dissonance. It doesn't say heart-based dissonance, right? It doesn't say heart-mind dissonance. It doesn't say feel into a thing dissonance. It doesn't say a state of having inconsistent sensory perceptions of things. No, it says thoughts. And
about the sensory perceptions,
right.
perhaps.
Right. And keep in mind, and whether you understand it or not, ever thought about it or not, or this balloon I'm floating now goes, oh yeah. There are a lot of tools right this moment that are on overdrive. In fact, the tools are working so hard that, the little tool machines are kind of probably overheating. Right?
Oh my God.
Okay. Are you following me here? Right?
Yeah.
Oh, okay, so that we can catch everybody else up into why I'm so. We have had the hardest time getting on here tonight. That's the. Yeah. Okay. Wow. I didn't even think about it like that.
Well, that's what I mean, because cognitive dissonance is a phrase, right? And I think you were both given that phrase by yourselves. Just leave it at that. That's the simplest.
Yes.
And because that's the closest match that you in the shirt holds on this thing. And it's the kind of thing that when I encounter that, that's why I laughed. I mean, when you first said it, I said, well, just look outside anywhere. And then I laughed even more, and I said, well, if y'all have got cognitive dissonance now, just wait, because
I know. I said that is oh my. Sorry.
Well, and I said to you then, and I'll say again, that I have been saying that even those of us that think we know a thing are going to be surprised. But quite frankly, I didn't hold that I was having those attachments either. So, surprise!
Well, I think it might be more apt to say when in relation to you when you said that was maybe you didn't think you were that far down the road to be, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
I didn't see that coming. But
no, you're right. I definitely didn't see that coming.
Yeah. Well, that's part of how to get rid of the cognitive dissonance. When something comes up, you go, If this is the thing that came up, that cognitive dissonance, this is the microphone, right? And you just kind of look around it and you go, I didn't see that coming. Okay. And you move on. Soon as you attach to something, as soon as you resist it, as soon as you go, well, no, that's not disclosure, or that's not unfettered access, or that's not whatever, blank. That's not what's supposed to happen on December 5th. That's not, that's attachment. Previous video on non-attachment, scratching the surface. So how do you navigate, what it sounds to me like what you're saying is, how do you navigate your release of the clutches of your cognitive dissonance, and how do you navigate the Mach 5, and that would be an incredibly inaccurate description of the pace at which things are unfolding. Yeah. And that by the way is going to click up in the next 40 hours.
Woohoo!
That's what I said. Just grab a bucket and a washcloth and you're all set.
Oh, okay. Well, just laugh.
Yeah, well,
It
that's
works for me.
we're all right. We're all right. We're all right. Okay, well,
So you want some steps?
yes, please.
Okay.
That would be lovely.
Truly, one of them is to get out of your head.
Okay.
So if there's a particular...
Oh, Lisa goes, okay.
Okay, no, I'm going to confess right here to being,
that's
why.
give me an example of something, and you can just make one up that you had before that you heard of or something. Just an example of something that's quote unquote, and don't be attached to the cognitive dissonance part, but just quote unquote is an example maybe of that. Cognitive dissonance, and then we can do steps on it instead of...
Oh, I see. Okay.
I think you're first, baby doll.
It was for me.
She was talking to you, just in case you wasn't sure.
I wasn't, and I was waiting.
Yeah, I know. You were hoping I was going to go first. I know. But no, this is you.
So
Okay.
this is kind of like quasi-cognitive dissonance in action.
Yeah, I feel ya. I'm a little swirly. Yes. I admit it. But, well, help me, ladies.
Okay, I can give an example. All right, I'll give you.
Okay, thank you.
Apparently, I didn't know it was that hard an assignment. Okay.
Yeah, I told you.
When shortly after, and so when 9/11 happened, and it had been a number of years afterwards, we'll just say, maybe 5-ish years. So a lot of research had been done. Well, a lot of beings knew immediately that something was really awry. They may not have known about they had a soul, or they may not have known about the deep state or the Cabal. They may not have known about Anu. They may not have known a whole lot of stuff. They were just doing their whole linear gig. But when they saw, in quote unquote, those planes hit whatever it was that they supposedly hit, they went from a purely linear thought process.
Yeah, that's a really good one. You're right.
So, and these particular beings I'm talking about towards the beginning are ones, so they're training. So they might have been engineers, they might have been pilots. They just so it will be very linear on that one for a minute.
Right.
And so all of their linear training, all of their linear routines, right? So, and that's not to say that none of these people didn't have big hearts and weren't already, I'm not addressing that at all, okay? So in that moment, when they watched this happen, they had a moment there of cognitive dissonance. That would be the truer definition of it in that sense that I'm discussing right now. Because as they watched it, all of their experience in, we'll say, a pilot, right? In piloting and maneuvering, and so we could use the Pentagon as an example, right? Mm-hmm. Was telling them utter bullshit, utter hogwash, bullocks to that. What are you talking about? Who are you kidding? What are you playing at, right? So that's, but the American in them, we'll say, if this was an American person, it is going, but you know the president and the linear, and I'm not even talking about the rest of them, just the linear part is going rate of speed, descent, and I'm not a pilot, so I can't click off the things that well, but they definitely covered the ones I just talked about. Right. So in that moment, and they thought, no, bullshit. Something's really smells bad here. Okay, so that would be one example. Now, what the reason I actually brought up 9/11 is, well, there's a number of reasons, but one of the is that a lot of beings, so fast forward a bunch of years, a lot of beings, when a lot of research, so the first kind of people I talked about had thought, okay, well, then immediately they started to do research and talk to friends and that would have same training and knew that this was absolute. So then they set about proving it, and they have reams of proof. But there was a lot of beings who would say, oh no, that's some conspiracy nut job theory. And for them, again, that might be kind of like a cognitive dissonance, because the ability to, their brain actually shut down, because in processing the fact that what their own self was thinking was not adding up, or they listened to friends, or maybe they just listened to stuff and it was convincing, it was much easier for them to just shut down, partially on the 9/11 thing, but in the grasping and the grokking of the even whiff of a potentiality of what was being said about 9/11 were even in the stratosphere somewhere of perhaps a possibility, right? I mean, you can see how far out. Then that would mean that everything else in their state of awareness, their frame of cognition and holding things would be severely challenged, if not totally brought askew as well. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Okay. So that kind of describes those two things. And so that's why when it's in the sense that you would, if you Google the word cognitive dissonance, that's a good example of it. And that's why it happens. So one of the ways to let go of it happening is, like I said before at the beginning, is to drop out of your head. So, and don't look head on whatever it is that's kind of flipping you out and that you're naming as cognitive dissonance. So this particular thing is giving me cognitive dissonance right now. Okay, so just let that go for a minute and get out of your head and start to feel into and question yourself of, what do I know? So that you have kind of a feeling, a touching your touchstone, right? And realigning of what you have what do I know? Not what do I know, what do I know? Right? Oh, I know that I feel connection when I'm with trees, right? So I'm saying, so you're reorienting so that, and that's why it leads me to believe that this new thing that popped into my consciousness, that this is part of a trigger and is exacerbated by those machines that I talked about, actually makes perfect sense.
Well, yeah, because I held cognitive dissonance in a bit of a different way, not terribly different, but so I wanted to look up the word dissonance, because I know what cognitive has to do with the mind. And I was very surprised that Merriam-Webster, not only with the word dissonance, the first one is lack of agreement, the dissonance between the truth and what people want to believe, especially inconsistency between the beliefs one holds or between one's actions and one's belief. Compare cognitive dissonance. Now, I don't know, it just seems like I was surprised to see them put cognitive dissonance in there. And I guess, Okay, see, I always thought whenever I thought of dissonance, I thought of the second definition here, a mingling of sounds that strike the ear harshly, a mingling of discordant sounds. I always felt like cognitive dissonance was shaking up the brain, like,
shattering your reality is how, yeah.
well, yeah, it was like, that's why but
Isn't that what I said? I said that.
Essentially.
The brain turns off because it can't even look at that thing because it would,
oh yeah, that's it. That is exactly what you said. That's not what I was, well, for one thing, I was surprised to see that they threw cognitive dissonance in with the word dissonance, because it's not, I don't know, for me, I knew what the word dissonance meant, I thought, because it was a discordant sound, not harmonic, not in frequency, right? That's what I was thinking dissonance was.
Well, that's
I never heard cognitive dissonance.
That's number 2 on the definition of Merriam.
Yes, I know, but I thought it was number 1. I thought dissonance meant discordant sounds, right? Out of harmonics, not pleasant, grating, that sort of thing, right? I never even knew that cognitive dissonance was even a term until I, started finding out about corruption and conspiracy theory.
Isn't that interesting? I bet that a lot of people would say that, like, goes back to what I told you that pinged in my consciousness at the beginning of this whole conversation, that, hey, we have this handy phrase right for this moment in time.
No, exactly. And I didn't even consider the thought that, well, of course it would be made up for this particular moment in time. And for me, the fact that I could look up just the word dissonance by itself and see that they got cognitive right there. And the very first definition is something to do with beliefs. Dissonance in and of itself has nothing to do with beliefs.
Right.
Not when
No, it's correct. That's correct. Just the word dissonance. That's correct.
So but why would it?
Well, so haven't I think I've been talking about a phrase that everything is connected for a long time.
No, yes, you have.
A recipe where we put all these things together and the cake's just about baked. Except we got like, what is it? A bomb, which is a French frozen cake-like dessert with an angel food thing in the middle. They're actually pretty good. But the bomba went the bomba when you're making it, and that's what's about to happen. Wow. So regardless of what the definition is, there's a feeling of it that, so how do you let go? Well, don't work on getting rid of it. Don't work on dismantling it. Again, go into your heart and what's the feeling, and so discordant okay, that makes sense. So discordant would be another way to look at it, because there's discordant energies. They're energy frequencies. So here's your dissonance with the sound, right, Sheila? So frequencies, sound is frequencies.
Right.
And so there are harmonics involved, which has to do with sound again, in everything that we do. Most people don't normally think about it that way because, okay, I'll just be really blunt. They're not paying a hell of a lot of attention to anything except the iPhone or this or that, the other thing, and they're not tuned in. And right now, their entire world, being, bodies are shaking because of a giant tuning fork is tuning them back into a resonance that is aligned with the truth of who they are. And the dissonance that they feel within themselves, or that their visual processing cortex is picking up when they look out there, is seeing a lot of that dissonance. And what a simple way to describe it is they're seeing and feeling and processing the dissonance between those two frequency shifts. One will stay and all the others will go. And if you're attached to one or some of the others that are going, well, then you're going to have a boatload of dissonance, cognitive dissonance, discordance, and, pick a dictionary and look up a bunch of more synonyms and you're on a roll. Because nothing is stopping what's coming. I have to laugh, you can look in different places and if you follow or watch or even occasionally a glance, from a great distance at Q or something, it's about the deep state or things being revealed or transparency coming out or absolute data and so on and so forth. So whatever you're, wherever you are on this thing that's happening right this minute and your perspective, yes, they're all related and it's all so much bigger than, you think. And nothing can stop what's coming. Yeah, but that's not just talking about Washington, D.C. and the deep state or the globalist or, the Rothschilds or, I'll say it again, the Rothschilds, and think of the biggest, baddest human planetary dude and dudess. So Rothschild and Queenie, right? Just to name two. Okay, you can have HRC in there too, right? And the one who purportedly left the planet November 30th in there too, right? So everybody's got a favorite that they like to vilify. They're just middle management. And some of them aren't even upper middle management of what is all going on, of this whole false construct. Now would be a really good time to begin to just have at least a whiff of grokking that. And then people would understand why, speaking of energy and speaking of magic and speaking of frequencies and speaking of the heart and speaking of, all the things that we play with, really is very helpful and valuable, because that's just a soup song of what is totally involved in this big picture of what's going on, which is it being employed and deployed and has been part of the fabric and the organization of the structure of everything else. It's not the structure that people think is causing them cognitive dissonance is not a linear structure. It's not just a basic, as we think, human structure. It sure as hell isn't a Republican or a Democratic structure. It's not a couple world globalist, Sorosian lunatic structure. Okay, they're not even upper middle management. And if you're not sure what that means, then go look at a business model thing, and that'll give you a good clue. So, yeah, I think this is a very big conversation, and just where we've played with right this moment is a heaping, few grains to deal with that, because there's a lot of things that we've talked about in here that we're going to give a whole pile of people a whole pile of what was our list now? Cognitive dissonance, discordant, you know, a few other synonyms there, you know, disharmony, dissension, division, friction, infighting, you know. So it's, I mean, again, what comes to mind, just to kind of see how everything ties together, you know, a lot of people think, oh, well, what about the ETs? Well, they're only good ETs. Oh, okay. Well, that's interesting. Or, you know, it's all the bad ETs and there are no good ETs. Oh, okay. Well, that's interesting. And when is disclosure going to happen? And, you know, when is the mainstream media going to, or the governments are going to tell us? And what people don't realize is that, okay, well, the governments have been hanging out with the non-benevolent ETs for you know, a long time. Before the known history would probably be a good scope of time there. So it's all tied together. And again, to add into the discordant and the disharmony and you know, the dissonance, and then you put the cog in there, which is causing cogs in the wheel of everybody's thinking. You've got remember I talked about, I don't know, in a recent conversation, you've got all your camps, right? So beings are all in their camps, and you've got your, you know, your UFO and all those camps, and you know, well, no, this is gonna have the secret spacecraft, and that's gonna be disclosed, and this is gonna that, and then it's all connected, you know. So anybody you can potentially point at and say, they are keeping me down. You know, they're not letting me have my money. They're not letting me have this. They're not letting me have that. And if you think seriously that they don't know about the you know, non-local, because that's a much more accurate way to describe it, involvement, then you're going to have a lot of serious, you know, D words around that.
Well,
Everything that the human being thought was so is not at all so. That would be a simple way to describe things.
Right. And see, well, see, that's why this, for me, it kind of ties into a lot of our conversations, because I have been concerned that what I think I'm doing here is actually maybe just an intellectual exercise. And I had to wonder about that again after our last conversation, because, you know, the whole thing with attachment, and really seeing that, yeah, I still had attachment. And I hear what you're saying about, you know, drop out of the head and get into the heart. Well, we already know from previous conversations, Sheila thinks she's doing that, and then sometimes maybe not doing that. And then two, some of what I have found out or felt that I figured out about myself from previous things where I didn't think I was connected. And then I discovered, no, I've been very connected all along. It's like, I don't know, I'm having trouble, obviously, with the higher mind and the lower mind. And I do know, and believe you me, because I do watch astrology and I do know that it is all connected. And I am very clear on that myself, because I can see all these different things out here that are all pointing to the same thing, even if some different works are saying the same thing, and people say, well, that doesn't say the same thing. And yes, it does. For me, I can see that.
Well, yeah, it says the same thing. That's why words is not the only thing that you want to count on, because you need to feel what they're saying. It's using the being who's doing the quote unquote saying, however that shows up, their frame of reference and their perspective on something. But if you
right,
it,
and I got that
you
down.
need it for just what that is, without attaching, detaching, thising, thating, ascribing your stuff to. So this said this. So that's why there was a while back, there's an echo now, there was a while back, late January, I think, early February, we were having a conversation and you were wrestling with something, Sheila, and if I looked at the pictures, I might be able to figure out which one it is. But, and I talked about looking at negative space. Okay.
Right.
So what's causing that echo?
Not sure.
Okay, can you see this foot here of the mic?
Yeah.
And this foot here.
Right.
Okay. So that would be the structure. And in here.
Right.
In here is the negative space.
Yeah, same here. Yeah. Like this is a sad triangle or a diamond. Right. But the negative space is in here.
Right. So tools like that, where you're not labeling that that's a diamond or a triangle, you're just noticing what it is for what it is. No attachment, no descriptors. You're just noticing what it is, and then you're playing with that. And that's, this is going to have to jump around a bit to lots of different things. One, because it's all related, and two, it's the best kind of place I can point us to right this moment. Is you think about, so here's something that may cause cognitive dissonance with some people, that love, universal, absolute, love, absolute, source, doesn't look at one being and say, oh, well, they were an angel, and so they are loved, right? And look at another being and say, well, wow, they were a right bastard, and say, nah, you don't get no love. That's not what love is. Love meets every being where they are for what they are in toto, and it is love. So, a bunch of steps down from that, you hear on this, in the different societies on earth, people talk about unconditional love. So if you love your kids unconditionally, if they're being a brat, doesn't mean that you stop loving them. It doesn't mean that you change the way you talk to them or act with them. Now, you can have your own, just using this as an example, you can have your own boundaries for yourself, where the frequency of what they may be giving off in some behavior that they want to try on is one thing, and for you, that's not a frequency that you want to play with. That's fine. But you've done it in a way that you're clear with you and they're clear with them, and there's a way, maybe there's a space or something happens and you can work that out. But that does not change the love there. It doesn't even change the showing of the love there. So for some, that's an easy concept. And for some, it's like, what? And everybody gets to it in a different way. So this is actually related to the cognitive dissonance, because you're going to need the kind of examples that I just brought up. I don't know, couple 100,000 or more examples of household names very quickly here on all sorts of levels. And we've broached this a lot, and there's a conversation I want to have at some point pretty soon here is a TikTok conversation, but the breadth and depth and complete immersion of just what has been going on in all venues, arenas, and threads of all sorts of things on unimaginably horrific and unimaginably sublimely delicious will be staggering for most beings.
Well, that's kind of why I wanted to have this conversation, because, and I told you before we started recording, and I hope everyone will take this in the spirit in which it's meant. I'm not concerned about all those other folks out there. They are source too, and they will get it or not. Their choice. Right this minute, I know what you said is true, or at least I thought I knew. And I thought I knew here, not just here. And after our last conversation, and even now, there's still, actually, it feels more so, because there's a lot of things now that I'm wondering how I've held some of these things. Because,
well, that's because you're thinking it to death instead of getting out of your head and into your heart. So it's one of those things, and I say this with absolute gentle love, that, I didn't see that coming. Okay. Yeah. Right back at you. Okay, cool. And you walk around the thing and you go, well, I'll be gobsmacked.
Well, that is kind of what I've been doing all week long.
And then you keep dropping out of your head and you stay in your heart and you play for a moment. So if this thing over here is what's gobsmacking you, as an example, and you go, what do I know? I know this kitty is soft. I know this flower smells delicious. Whatever it is, so that, but knowing on a knowing level, on a resonance level, on a pure, energetic, simpatico level. And then you look back at this again, and it will change. It will not look the same that it did when you turned aside to do this. And now instead of 360 degrees of it going, whoa, I didn't see that coming. It's, there's a few degrees you go, yeah, no problem. And then but that's how you do it. It's a dance, because as you have those things occur, you're changing moment by moment. Just the very act of you having this thing, this cognitive dissonance thing with this, I'm just using an example right here, has changed the physiology, the chemical makeup, the fibers in the neurons, and the synapses, and every, to use whatever would be an akin apt description, in every of your body, so mental, emotional, physical, electromagnetic, energetic, etheric, auric levels, has changed everything. And you have put that in the recipe, the celestial cookie batch recipe that every one of us is throwing ingredients into the same cookie bowl. And you've added those ingredients to now help all beings in all of Source's multiverses with them.
Well, if you don't mind, I need to go back over one or two of them ingredients. because okay, so because and I wrote it down because I didn't want to interrupt your speaking, but I wanted to say when you said when you drop out of your head and into your heart and you say, okay, well, what do you know? And like I said, I was doing that, well, my version of that all weekend. And again, I thought I knew. When you say, what do you know? That's just it. I thought I knew some things.
But if you're thinking you knew some things, then you're not dropped out of your head.
No, when I discovered the attachment to things in our last conversation, when I could very clearly see at that moment that I obviously had an attachment that I had not seen previously.
Mm-hmm.
It caused me then to, because I thought I knew a thing. I thought I knew it here.
But you did. But you did. See, you're not one and done. And you're not just a linear flat plane. You're toroidal. So you did know it, and you did experience it, and you did grok it, and you did have it landed in you.
Yes.
And in that, all of you changed. Right? And then there are other parts of you that encountered something else, or right, whatever was the trigger at that moment. It came around, and there was you could label it as the same thing. Well, shit, I thought I handled that, and the same thing. That's not the same, because everything changed in the moment that you got it in. So now you're just undoing this. It's a big job. Lisa, what did you say?
Yeah. Well, for Sheila, in this instance, this particular thing that I feel like is hanging you up is, I think you've turned it a little bit into an intellectual exercise.
Yes.
In that you're mulling it over, and you're applying it to things I don't think you should be applying it to. And I'm going to say this. I think what you discovered there, what you didn't see coming, was that perhaps you were a little too attached to being right. And that's what you need to sit with. For me, I'm just saying.
Well, you're here, and
everything that Sheila thinks she knows about things necessarily. Does that feel right?
Yes. Okay, that makes better sense, because all of a sudden I was questioning that makes better sense, Lisa. Thank you for that. Because the thing I was attached to, I got that part, that we talked about that in that conversation, that I was still being attached to being right. That is my MO in the past.
Put your hand on the part of your body that is giving forth this point of view.
Right now?
Right now.
I guess it would be my head. Well, now I'm going to put it here because I know where this is coming from. This is exactly what I and I want to thank you, Lisa, because you're right. I turned it in, but because I was examining everything, the biggest issue I was having with myself was my knowing that I'm a kick-ass creator being, instead of where now I know that focus should have been, right? Because all of a sudden I was doubting, because that's where I thought that was coming from, was my knowing of who I am, my divinity. Like part of that conversation was because I felt like I was trying to convince someone of what I thought I knew for myself, what I really feel. And I see now that that's
more attached to them agreeing with you or something.
right.
It seemed like the attachment
It's still
was
that
in
attachment.
how someone else responded to your knowing. To me, that's slightly different.
I see what you're saying. That's very helpful. Thank you very much. Yeah, that's what freaked me out, quite frankly, was, wait a minute, because I
The
just
heart doesn't freak out.
No, but the head will.
Yeah, I know.
I
Get
have
out of the
not.
head. Get out of the head. Nope. Get out of the head. You just get.
It's so hard. No,
Okay, we have a new. This is a command that I use with Keegan, or actually my dogs. Leave it.
Trim it. Yeah.
And they're sneaking over to that like eons dead thing. Leave it. So when I see Sheila, leave it.
Oh, fun.
I will appreciate each and every time you do it. I can promise you that. Wow. Well, now the moving trucks have arrived. So
okay, Lisa, our work here is done. We're all set.
I said in my heart, how do you feel now, honey?
Oh, did you really? I'm telling you, that's listen, and BZ said something earlier too that was in response to something that I had been thinking. And I can't remember now exactly what it was but I was like, yeah, she heard me. Because the way you answered it, and I will find it, I will go back and find it in the video, because the way you answered it, you knew you were answering something from somebody, even if it was, you didn't know it was me. Wow. You know what else I'm beckoned to say at this moment is, for me personally, that has been very difficult is, okay, there's meditation offers silence for thinking. And when you think a lot, no, I'm serious.
I know. I'm laughing because I have to meditate right now. And I'm having the same. Yeah, it's doing a thing.
Because, it just, there's a lot. When you talk about dropping out of your head and into your heart, and I mean, I do get that, but I guess I'm not adept at it quite yet enough to know when I'm up there. Yes, I know. Leave it. What did you say?
I said what you said. I just didn't need to say it out loud. Usually I just raise my eyebrow and that's all I need to say.
We didn't see the eyebrow.
No, I heard her way over here, believe me.
Okay.
Okay, well,
It's all good. It's all cosmically delicious. It's all fantastic.
Yes.
And it's all speeding up, and it's all crumbling down, and this is the moments that we're in right now, and we need to get with it.
Well, and I want to say something here too just now, and I'm going to put a link to it in the show more section. Let me make a note of that, because I have said those things and sometimes forget. There, you mentioned earlier that all the tools are cranked up to, a gazillion right now. And what you meant by tools, I'm sure, are the tools of suppression that we've kind of talked about before. And it made me think about something that I saw just a few moments before we gathered here.
And most of those are not seen, and I'm not talking about censoring on social media.
No, and I realize that that's true. I mean,
those are a part of it too, but that's not what I'm talking about.
Well, apparently there was a lot going around. I didn't happen to see it myself over the weekend in regards to geomagnetic energy and things. And it caused a few people were investigating it. And apparently there's an entire, from 1 a.m. till 6 p.m. missing out of a data stream from one of the magnetopause chart places. Danny Arnold McKinney did about a 10-minute Transpicuous News on it. I didn't get to finish watching it, but because there was some big anomalies reported at the North Pole. And so I don't know that there's a connection, because there was a lot of reports of different stuff going on over the weekend. And I know the planet is doing things, we had that big earthquake in Alaska. And there's been, of course, folks are thinking that was a tool that was used to cause that, which would also cause some of what was apparently seen in Norway, or it could, at any rate.
Yeah, well, it's a combination of all of those things. And another way that was helpful for people, whatever we played. Well, I played laughingly, looking at the dictionary or something like that. Those are all frames of reference that were never accurate to begin with, but right now they are not accurate at all. And what we're all being gently and lovingly guided to, and depending on where your frame of reference has been, that may seem like some giant is taking you and like doing Mach 5 with you up and down in a milkshake machine. So because what's happening is we're being asked to go within. We're being asked to go to our center. And remember, in the last, I think it was the non-attachment video, but that visual that I gave of all that's inside. So all of those benchmarks heretofore we thought would be good descriptors or recipes, or they're don't use them anymore. Can't use them anymore. Don't need that anymore. And you might look at a gauge, you might look at something like that, and just as a little bit of an wholly outdated, wholly inaccurate kind of if you've ever tried to use field glasses or a camera or something, and there's a bird flying or UFO or whatever it is, and you look with your naked eye for a minute to kind of get a reference, okay, and then you bring whatever it is tool you're using. So you could use it kind of like that, because the real tool to take the photograph is the camera, or to magnify it is the field glasses or whatever it is, right? But you use that just wholly inaccurate in this, right? What I'm talking about, to give you a frame of reference, and then you can zero in with the real tool, and you are the real tool. And the only way that we can truly get that on every level is to have every other instrument, every other benchmark, every other tool or dictionary or whatever it is you're going to use show you that it's not working anymore. Because you're the expert for you. And it's an inside job. And that's another conversation. I mean, inside job is huge. I mean, it's multiverses in scope, literally and figuratively and metaphorically. It's not talking about meditate and give silence to all the thoughts that are running around in your head. That's not what it's about. Okay, that's a very, very tiny linear, whiff of something in there, but that's not the big picture of what it's about. So anyways, there's a lot going on, and you could say nothing started happening yet, and we're moving really fast, and you could say we're slow as molasses. And think of all of this as centrifugal force to help shake more of the stuff off of you, because you ain't seen nothing yet. And if you think you got cognitive dissonance now, just wait a nanosecond. And it's all perfect and perfectly done.
Okay. We're all right. We're all.
There you go. Yeah. I'm here. I am here. And I'm all right.
Yeah. I am here and I am all right.
Because the I am is eternal. And the I am knows exactly what to do.
Wow. Okay. Well.
You got this. Each one of us, each you, got this. We all got this. It doesn't matter if we think we do. It doesn't matter if we're going, what are you, fucking nuts? Doesn't matter. Because it's absolutely, absolutely, isn't there a Turner phrase? God's honest truth. Well, there you go. That's what it is.
Lisa, did you want to add anything further to this one?
No, I thought this was beautiful. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Because it isn't one and done. This is a great reminder. This is, it's exciting, and it can also feel overwhelming at times. And that reminder to get out of my head and back into my heart was exactly what I needed tonight.
Well, I do have to spend more time on that, because like I said, there's been a lot of things that I thought I was holding in my head. I don't know. I think I'm just a little confused. I think I need to wait a couple of days, just put it down and let it percolate a couple of days, because there's some, and I'm not going to use the term cognitive dissonance in this particular case. There's just some dissonance for me at this moment, and I'm not quite sure. I mean, I know that because I can feel it. I can feel busy getting ready to yell, leave it. But I'm just going to drop it for a few days and revisit it at another time.
I hope not.
Well,
not revisit it, no, but be with it from your heart.
Okay.
And embrace it. And love it. That'd be fun.
Yeah, that would be fun.
Because it's a whole different thing.
We'll do that then.
It's a whole different thing.
And now for something totally different.
Right.
Okay, well, I would love to hear from anybody who would love to ask any questions or, you know, submit comments or anything like that. Oh, how to get in touch with each one of us is always in the show more section of this video, all the videos. And I got a feeling we'll be talking about this one again at some other time because they're all connected anyway. So thank you, ladies.
Thank you.
Till next time.
Much love.